really major area that I think the Indian system is a little worried about the Biden administration is not so much as their policy towards India as much as their policy towards China.
The question of predictability and reliability has been an issue with the Trump administration.
Joining me today, of course, is Meera Shankar, who served as India's ambassador to the United States between 2009 and 2011, and Pramit Palchaudhuri, the consulting editor at Hindustan Times. A lot of people have spoken to have said Trump is good for India because of the Howdy Modi and the bonhomie and camaraderie that has been witnessed in Prime Minister Modi with another 3 years really and Donald Trump. I mean, as far as India is concerned, is it a Biden presidency or is it a Trump presidency that is better India?
On the broad Indo-US relationship, I don't think it really matters who is president. We've had a perfectly sound relationship under Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. We've also had a very good relationship with George W. Bush. It's a bipartisan relationship. Biden himself is one of the strongest supporters of the Indo-US nuclear deal. That was in many ways a hallmark turning point in our relationship. Prime Minister Modi met Barack Obama 11 times, and Obama was the only U.S. president to have been our chief guest on Republic Day. So it's not as if that a very liberal Democratic president was somebody Modi had difficulty with. I would argue that when you're a prime minister or president of a major country, ultimately you're looking at who can help you in terms of your own national interests and in terms of what bilateral relationships are. It's not really about personalities. That helps, definitely. And I think in the case of Modi and Trump, one of the things that I've understood is that it was very quickly realized, as I think every major government has, is the Trump presidency was unusual in the degree in which the president's personality imposed itself on a large chunk of the administration. The president has his own quirks, and it's important, therefore, to have a working relationship with the president. From what I've understood is that what you had in the American system was effectively two-level foreign policy. You had the institutions, the State Department, the Pentagon, the intelligence agencies, who would come in and say, look, we have all of these plans with India, which existed beforehand, have been going on ever since. But you have to get the president on board because Trump is the kind of guy, the file will come to him and he'll suddenly say, I don't like this, stop it. So you need to make sure the president is on board. So as not just Modi, but let's say Macron of France, Putin of Russia, to some degree even Xi Jinping for a while, have all attempted to develop a personal link with the president to ensure that the second layer of the foreign policy continues to function. A Biden administration obviously functioned just like a normal American administration, in which the institutional structure and the president would be almost very much in alignment with each other. Having said that, on the specific policies, I think the one area, or there's a number of areas, the really major area that I think the Indian system is a little worried about the Biden administration is not so much as their policy towards India as much as their policy towards China. Trump has been very hard on China. It's often been highly unilateral in his actions, but he's been arguably the hardest U.S. president in opposing and taking on the Chinese in a number of issues. It's not as if Biden, if you look at the speeches and comments by Biden's core foreign policy advisors, Jake Sullivan, Tom Donilon, Tony and so on, they're very clear that the future biggest single problem facing the United States geopolitically over the next decade or more will be China. But they differ with the Trump administration on the tactics in which to handle it. They tend to see it as more of a technological or economic challenge rather than a military one. And it's one of the reasons that you see that other than Michelle Flournoy, who is likely to be Biden's chief of defense secretary, none of them have really mentioned or talked about the Quad in any serious detail. They don't seem to take it it's there, but we're not going to invest in it, is what my.
Right. His worldview on India and China, your take.
Well, I think I agree with Pramit that on the core of the relationship, there's a bipartisan consensus. And this is driven by the challenge posed by China's rise and the need to create a sustainable balance in the Indo Pacific region. And that will survive whether it's Trump or Biden. Having said that, I would say that Trump's behavior on the relationship has been erratic. He has, not interfered with the strategic and defense relationship, which his institutions have been taking forward. So that has been advancing institutionally. But economically, if you take a look step by step at what Trump has done, it's hit us pretty hard. He's withdrawn GSP for Indian exports to the United States. He has withdrawn India's developing country status, which means tighter rules on subsidies for farm products and others apply. He has put punitive tariffs on Indian steel and aluminum exports to the United States. He has tightened up the H-1B visa, L-1 visa program, and in fact had suspended it altogether till the courts restored it. And now he has hiked up the fees and the qualifications to make it more difficult for Indian companies to bring in their workers. And overall, on the economic side, I think he has been very protectionist as far as Indian exports are concerned. So there's been a downside and there's been a plus side. You might see the same with Biden. You'll see a downside maybe in that they could prioritize human rights and democratic freedoms more than Trump has, and also climate change, push India to do more on climate change than what we have committed to in Paris. But on the other hand, you might find more predictability of policy and perhaps less pressure on the economic side and more willingness to negotiate rather than act unilaterally. On China, I would say, I would give a little nuance to what Pramit has said, in that Trump's policy towards China has also been erratic. In the last years of the Obama administration, they had evolved a policy of what they called rebalance towards the Asia Pacific, where they would move more naval forces and Marines to the Asia Pacific theater from the European theater, where they would have a comprehensive policy looking at defense cooperation, political cooperation, economic cooperation with the countries in this region to counterbalance China. And it would lay emphasis on building relations with their key allies and then with their partners. Now, the first thing Trump did was to throw away the rebalance policy, and he walked out of the Trans-Pacific agreement that had been signed by President Obama. And the rebalance strategy meant that he didn't pursue the redeployment of American military forces in this theater. Then towards the end, he did pursue a tighter policy on trade, and then with, including levying duties on a range of Chinese imports. But at the same time, you notice his national security advisor says that he was ringing up Xi Jinping and begging him to import more agricultural products from the US to help him win the elections and get the farmers' support. So it's been erratic and not predictable. You don't know if after the elections, Trump would cut a deal with China and say, now we have this beautiful agreement, the most beautiful agreement. You never saw anything like it before. And then, turn a corner. So I think the question of predictability and reliability has been an issue with the Trump